Greetings, I hope you're all doing well. We're going to talk today about customer acquisition. So, first of all, I should thank Michael Conger for putting together the beautiful slides. You'll notice they look a lot nicer than normal. That's because he put them together and I just borrowed them. And Mark Lacker for a lot of the content that's in here. If you've had Lacker's class before, some of this will look familiar, and it's a good time to dust off some of these tools because you'll need them now as we jump into the channels box of the Lean Canvas. So we're going to talk about a couple things. We'll talk about our customers. Do you really understand your customer segments? How big is your addressable market? Do you know who else is targeting them? We're also going to talk about the specific channels that you'll want to use. I'll move my video up a bit. So what parts of the funnel will they target? We'll talk about what that means. What does it cost to use these different channels? And how effective will they be? So those are the topics we'll cover in this video. And first, I want to watch a YouTube video that is incredibly useful in thinking about how well we really understand our customer segment. So let me pull that up.
Yeah, market segmentation is probably at the very, very center of go-to-market strategy that's successful. So first of all, let's talk about what is a market segment. So a market segment is a group of people that have two things in common. One is a use case. They have a common set of needs that they would be fulfilling through a product like yours or someone else's. And secondly, and this is the one people miss, they talk to each other. So a segment is actually a unit of conversation, and therefore, and the reason why that's so important is that if you can get your marketing message circulating inside a segment, the segment will circulate it for you. No entrepreneur can afford to go out and pay to address every prospect that they want to sell to. You have to have your community selling for you, but that means you have to be able to model the boundaries of that community and be able to aim your marketing communications activities in a way that that community embraces them and that it resonates inside that community. So just to make that point crystal clear, when you talk about your product, you're saying things that apply to many communities. That will not resonate inside a community. When you talk about the specific needs of that community in the language that community talks to itself about, even when you're not talking about you, now you're going to resonate with that community. So the market segmentation in that sense is a communications vehicle to make sure you talk the talk of the customer so that they can then walk the walk with you as you're going forward. So that's idea number one. The second thing about market segmentation, and this is kind of a fun experience you have if you've been marketing for a while, fun if you like learning with pain. So the idea is whenever you think about a segment, people usually they draw a circle. And they say, okay, so we're targeting this segment. And then inevitably somebody comes along and says, well, what about this customer who's right at the edge of the circle, almost inside, not quite. And then, well, okay, we'll bring them in too. And then, well, we'll bring these people in here. And then and pretty soon there's no integrity to the process at all. So what we've learned about segments is you cannot define a segment by its boundary, because wherever you draw a line, there'll be somebody just on the other side of that line who's pretty darn close to the segment, right? So what you do instead is you define segments by their center points. What you do, this is where they get this idea called the poster child. The poster child is the perfect exemplar, the ideal representation of the target customer with the compelling reason to buy. And that person, and often you create something that they call a persona, which would be the embodiment of that target customer. And then you aim all of your marketing communications at that one person because it resonates with all the people around them. And furthermore, you get your engineering and you aim all of your engineering at solving the use case exactly the way that customer would like it solved. And again, that engineering will resonate with people around. And so therefore, you can act on the world in units of use cases and word-of-mouth groups. And so segmentation is designed to allow you to leverage engineering to the point where the world is on your side. As soon as you go outside the use case and as soon as you go outside the conversation group, the world is no longer working with you. They may not be working against you, but they're not working with you. And as an entrepreneur at the beginning, you desperately need the world to work with you. Eventually, if you become a global standard, then you don't need conversation groups. Google does not need a conversation group. It is a global standard, but most of us are not Google. And so particularly at the beginning, and even at the beginning, Google was not Google. So how do you get started with those early groups?
So pull back up our slides here. So the link, that's a YouTube video. That was Jeffrey Moore. The link is on the side if you'd like to go back and watch that again. A couple of things that are new that he's added in this video to our conversation. So far, we've really focused on identifying the customer segment and their problems, but we haven't talked as much about this side of understanding the customer segment in the sense of exactly how they talk to each other, what language they use, the way they talk about their own needs as a community. And I think this is a really valuable concept as you start to think about what channels can we use and how can we communicate with our customer segment. So let's think about these things: the location where they live, work, play, their age, gender, relationships, education, work, life events, interests, behaviors, device usage, purchase history, travel. All these things are very, very useful to understand about our customer segment. And we've got a fair number of tools to start to dig into this. So we can use social media, we can think about group affiliations, observations, snowball sampling. So snowball sampling refers to finding one person in your customer segment, asking them for somebody else who might also be in that same customer segment, asking that person, and just sort of tracing it down. So using identifying a single customer and then snowballing from there, finding additional people who are in that same group. So this is really, really useful if you've got a segment. Let's say, I'll take climbing. If you've got a group of rock climbers and you happen to run into a rock climber and that's your customer segment, well, interview one, they're definitely going to know other rock climbers. And so you can say, hey, who else should I be talking to? And they'll recommend people and they'll recommend people. And pretty soon you've got a pretty large sample. There's really interesting ways to analyze their searches. I think you can learn more and more quickly by just going to these sites that are listed here on this slide than if I were to explain them to you. But I would strongly encourage you to take a look at all the websites that are coming up on the slides. A lot of this lecture is more about pointing you in the direction of really relevant resources. So I'll try to keep the lecture short, but I would encourage you to spend the rest of the time digging through these resources, thinking about how you apply them to your particular project. Here's, Prism Segments is another pretty interesting resource. One of the things I'd encourage you to do, just to even play with it a little bit, is try to figure out what segment you're in or what segment your family that you grew up in is in, and look at some of the differences. This resource gives you a lot of information about, the places they shop, where they go out to eat, all these kinds of things that will help you understand a particular segment better. Building a persona is a really powerful tool. As Jeffrey Moore said in the video that we watched, you're going to aim your marketing really at a single customer. You're going to try to come up with the ideal customer for your product or service. And so you want to aim your marketing directly at that person. And so it's helpful to build this persona. There's good resources here below. I'll let you dig into those and would strongly encourage you to do so that your teams can build a persona of exactly who you would be targeting your product or service towards. So how big is your addressable market? Sorry, I keep having to move my video around because these slides are a little bit, everyone's a little bit different. You can gather this data. This is really just an example of a Fermi problem, which I guess we'll talk about more in the next set of lectures, but where you've got to make an estimate based on limited data. If you're trying to figure out how many rock climbers there are in the United States, one way to do that would be to use Facebook and start to include or exclude criteria that are of interest to you, and it'll give you a potential reach. And so that's one way to sort of estimate the size of your target market, but it's not the only tool. So you may have a customer segment that's probably not very active on Facebook. Young children or older, seniors and people that are less active. So then you can use tools like the United States Census. You can do some smart Googling. You can just get clever about figuring out how many people are actually in these kinds of groups. So again, Marketing Mentor is another interesting place. It's really helpful to know, as the question on the top of the slide says, do you know who else is targeting your customer? So this image on the right is from the National Coffee Association of the USA. And the National Coffee Association has all kinds of information about coffee drinkers in the US. And you can find a list of industry associations on this website here, the marketingmentor.com. I was doing some work one time for somebody that had developed a fly fishing gadget and found lots and lots of useful information because there was a fly fishing, I believe it was a fly fishing association, or maybe it was just an industry report, fly fishing industry report, that gave us tons of information about who these customers were, where they lived, where they traveled, breakdowns on gender, on age, on income, all these things that are incredibly useful. So industry associations can be very, very helpful. Now, as we think about, move my video just a bit. As we think about what channels we're going to use, it is helpful to kind of break down the parts of the funnel. So the funnel, there's lots of versions of this funnel, but the funnel essentially communicates the idea that there are some channels that are better for making people aware. Picture a billboard you see on the side of the road. A billboard isn't so much about getting you to pull the trigger and actually buy something. The billboard is really to raise awareness, right? So there's some channels that work really well for promotion and generating awareness. There's other channels that work well for engagement and helping people kind of consider your product or service. And then there's some channels that actually work the best for sales, for getting people to take action. So one of the things I'd ask you to do is think very carefully about not just a single channel. We're going to sell this through Facebook. But what's the basket or the collection of channels that you'll use that facilitate awareness, engagement, and action, right? So what does it cost to use these different channels? How effective will they be? Sorry, I'm gonna move my video again. Go to the source. So you can go to ad networks, media outlets, sales agents, do your own research. And figure out exactly what it's going to cost. One thing that I've had a lot of teams do in the past that I think is incredibly useful is to actually just run a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad. It's pretty easy to set up. If everybody kicks in, $5 or less even, you can run an ad for a couple days. And then have the ad go to a particular landing page, and you can say something along the lines of, this product or service is still under development. But, could you fill out a quick survey for us about to provide us with information? And that'll give you really good data about how many people actually viewed your ad, how many people took the time to click on it, and of the people who clicked on it, how many people actually answered your survey. So don't be afraid to actually try some of these things, to build ads and to test them out. You can also find benchmarks. There's lots of ballpark estimates of CAC, which is the cost of acquiring a customer. And there's different freemium business model conversion rate analysis. There's lots of stuff out there that will provide you with good comparisons and assist you in coming up with estimates for how much it actually costs you to acquire a customer. Real quick, from a definition standpoint, the cost of acquiring a customer is how much does it cost you to acquire a single customer? So it's exactly like it sounds. So for example, maybe I have an app and I do a bunch of research and I run some tests and I figure out that for every $5.52 that I spend, I acquire one customer, right? Now, if I'm a bank and I'm trying to get somebody to sign up for a new checking account or savings account, the cost is probably $300 or $400. So the cost of acquiring customers is going to vary a lot by industry, by channel, by product or service. And so one of the things that you're going to have to do for your business model analysis coming up is figure out what the costs of acquiring your customer are. In order to do that, you need to know which channels you're using, what they cost. So this is the foundational research that will help you make those kinds of, or figure out those kinds of issues. So your tasks, you need to learn more about your segment. You need to figure out the size of your segment. You know, how many people are we talking about? How many potential customers are out there? You need to figure out what channels you want to use. And you need to estimate the cost of acquiring your customers. Again, I would strongly encourage you to go back through, use the resources listed in this slide deck. I'll post the deck as well as the video. Take some time, really go deep. You've identified the customer segment, but now it's time to really understand them and figure out how you can communicate with them effectively. As always, I'm available through office hours, or just shoot me an email and we can coordinate. I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.